You know, there are places in this world that are more than just property, right? They're anchors. They're where your history lives. For me, that place was a little log cabin, maybe 2 bedrooms and a porch, nestled on the western shore of Lake Serenity. We called it the Old Fisherman's Rest, but honestly, it was just home, even if I only spent my summers there. My grandfather, a man who thought the government was a conspiracy and processed wood with a handsaw, he built that place back in '57. He and my grandma raised my dad there, teaching him to respect the water, to keep your hands busy, and to live simply. When my old man passed 2 years ago, the keys came to me, and it was the only piece of land I ever truly cared about. It smelled like pine sap and damp earth. The water was always cold, and the silence. Man, the silence was sacred. I should have known the silence wouldn't last. Trouble wears expensive shoes and drives black SUVs. I learned that the hard way. About a year ago, I started seeing the signs going up down the road, Azure Shores Estates. Exclusive lakeside living, starting at $3.5 million. And then the tearing began. They bulldozed 40 acres of beautiful old-growth pine, the kind that takes a century to replace, to make room for these enormous, glittering, glass and stone monstrosities. They looked less like homes and more like corporate retreats that had been dropped by a helicopter. So less things. I tried to ignore it, figured they could have their little playground. I had my 3 acres, my dock, and my peace. But greed doesn't respect boundaries. It just moves them. It was a perfect Tuesday morning, the kind where the lake fog burns off before 9 a.m. and leaves everything sparkling. I pulled up to the cabin. I was taking the week off just to work on the dock, and I immediately knew something was wrong. 2 guys, decked out in designer polo shirts and khakis, were marching around my land like they owned a map to Narnia. One was short and stocky, tapping a laser measure against my old woodshed. The other, the leader, was a tall, silver-haired guy with a tan so artificial it looked chemically bonded to his face. I shut off the engine and stepped out. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" I asked, keeping my voice level, though my stomach was already doing the butterfly dance of impending conflict. The silver-haired guy, Prescott Thorne, didn't even flinch. He walked towards me with this sickeningly confident smile, the kind that says, "I'm rich, and you're not, so naturally, I'm right." "You must be Mr. Finch," he said, extending a hand I absolutely did not shake. "Prescott Thorne, president of the Azure Shores Homeowners Association. This is Marcus, our compliance officer. Just conducting a routine architectural assessment." My blood went cold. An assessment of my property? This is private land, Thorne. It has nothing to do with your gated community. He chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "Well, actually, according to the newly updated boundary survey filed last quarter, your charming little structure now falls squarely within the Azure Shores jurisdiction." He gestured vaguely at my grandfather's cabin, a structure that had stood proudly since Eisenhower was president. "We're here to help you get compliant. We're thinking white trim, maybe some synthetic siding, definitely better landscaping. And that cabin? It'll have to meet the current standards." I stared at him. The sheer arrogance of it was like a punch to the gut. They weren't just moving in next door. They were trying to swallow me whole. "Get off my land, Thorne," I said, every word a stone. "You leave your cheap cologne and your fake paperwork on the pavement, and you get out of here. Now." Thorne's smile vanished, replaced by a tight, practiced grimace. "We'll be in touch, Finch. You're fighting an uphill battle, and we have the best legal counsel in the state on retainer. Don't make this messy." He and Marcus retreated to their black Range Rover, disappearing down the road like a bad omen. That was the opener. The polite, legal veneer. 3 days later, the official letter arrived. It was embossed, heavy, and smelled faintly of expensive paper. Inside, pages of jargon detailing my violations. Unauthorized exterior color, it was natural log. Grass exceeding 2 inches, it was a meadow. And the final insult, non-conforming structure. The Old Fisherman's Rest fails to meet the architectural elegance required by the association. They threatened fines starting at $10,000, escalating every week. I didn't burn the letter, though I wanted to. I took it straight to the county assessor's office. An older woman named Martha, who knew my dad, pulled up the digital map. I leaned over the counter, pointing to my parcel. "Martha, tell me this is a mistake. Tell me they don't own me." She sighed, adjusting her glasses. "Oh, Caleb, I wish I could. Look here. She zoomed in. There it was, my beloved cabin, now a tiny, unwelcome island in the middle of their massive green blob. They filed the amendment 2 months ago. Clean paperwork. Thorne's people are meticulous. If you want this reversed, you're looking at a full legal challenge. I felt the rage start to boil, that deep, cold fire that says, this is worth fighting for. I drove home and made 2 calls. The first was to my cousin, Tessa Vance, an environmental and real estate attorney with a reputation for being a shark in sensible heels. Tess, I'm fighting a land war with rich psychopaths. Get ready. The second thing I did was install the best damn security system money could buy. I wanted proof, because I knew this wouldn't stay in the realm of certified mail for long. My instincts, sadly, were right. It was 1:47 a.m., and the vibration of my phone jolted me awake. Motion sensors, back porch. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding in my throat, and brought up the live feed. 3 figures, dressed in dark clothing, were creeping around the edge of the cabin. One was fiddling with my electrical panel. Another, I recognized the stocky build of Marcus, the compliance officer, was hammering a fresh notice onto my front door. I wasn't a hothead, but this was my home. This was my sanctuary. I grabbed the old 12-gauge from the wall, my grandpa's, and I threw open the front door. I racked the slide, the sound loud and terrifying in the night silence. I didn't load a shell, but they didn't need to know that. Freeze. Get off my property, or I swear to God, you'll regret the next step you take. I warned. Marcus froze, dropping his clipboard. The guy at the electrical panel bolted instantly, melting into the woods. Marcus raised his hands, stammering, "We're just serving papers, Mr. Finch. HOA business. Trespassing is a crime, Marcus." I spat, stepping onto the porch so they could get a clear look at the steel barrel. "You have 5 seconds to follow your little friend. And tell Thorne that this changes everything." They scrambled away, falling over themselves in the dark. I watched them go, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from a mixture of adrenaline and pure, volcanic rage. They were playing dirty. Fine. I could play dirty too. The next morning, the confrontation was public. I was having coffee on the porch, waiting for Tessa's detailed plan, when Thorne's black Range Rover pulled up. He stepped out, looking immaculate, like he was about to tee off at the club. "Morning, Finch." He greeted me, his tone sickeningly cordial. "I came to offer you one final, easy out." He pulled a thick document from his leather portfolio. "We've accelerated the fines, given the hostile response to our compliance notices. You're now liable for $45,000 in immediate penalties. Your rustic property is severely depreciating the value of our entire development." I crossed my arms, looking him dead in the eye. "And the easy out is? Sell. Walk away. We'll offer you a premium, $100,000 over market value. Sign the papers, and the fines disappear. We handle the demolition. You get peace and a decent check." He looked genuinely sorry for me, which made my skin crawl. "Thorne," I said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. "You don't understand the first thing about me or this place. This isn't just land. This is the last thing I have from my family. I wouldn't sell this to you for 10 times that amount." Thorne sighed, the practiced patience of a man who deals with inferiors. "I was afraid you'd say that." He motioned toward the road. I turned just as a heavy work truck pulled up, hauling a flatbed trailer. 2 workers jumped out and started digging post holes at the edge of my driveway, right next to the massive, ancient cedar tree. Within minutes, they were hammering in a huge, professional-grade sign. The banner read, "Future site of Azure Shores Clubhouse and Community Fitness Center. Coming winter." It was a blatant, monstrous declaration of war. They weren't waiting for the legal process. They were trying to intimidate me into submission. I stomped toward the sign, my fists clenched so tight my knuckles were white. "Get that damn thing off my land." I yelled at the workers. They just shrugged, looking uncomfortable. I spun back to Thorne, who was watching with smug satisfaction. "You think this is a game, you son of a b. It's business, Finch," he interrupted smoothly. "And we have limitless resources. You're one man against an association of extremely wealthy homeowners. Think about the years of litigation, the stress, the cost, the eventual, inevitable loss." He straightened his tie. "You made your choice." He got back into his Range Rover and drove away, leaving that obscene sign looming over my grandfather's cedar. That night, I wasn't sleeping. I was watching the screens. Tessa was filing injunctions. Sheriff Rourke was sympathetic but couldn't act without a clear crime beyond simple trespassing, and I knew Thorne knew that. I kept the shotgun loaded this time. I was waiting. Around 2:15 a.m., the cameras went off again. Two guys, masked, approaching the back door. They weren't serving papers this time. They were carrying pry bars. They were going to break in. I grabbed the phone and called Sheriff Rourke's private cell. Then I armed myself. I didn't wait for them to breach the door. I threw it open and leveled the gun. This time, it was loaded. I called the sheriff, and I'm not waiting for him to get here. Drop the tools right now. The two figures froze. One, seeing the threat was real, dropped his pry bar and took off like a shot. The second, smaller man hesitated, then followed. I didn't chase them. I stayed on the porch, scanning the darkness, feeling the cold weight of the shotgun in my hands. This wasn't a property dispute anymore. This was a violation. Sheriff Rourke arrived 10 minutes later. He took one look at the prime marks on the door jamb, the grotesque billboard in my driveway, and the fear in my eyes. "This is getting ugly, Ren," he muttered, using my old nickname. "They're escalating past civil court. This is intimidation." The next day, it got worse. I drove back from town with Tessa, and as we pulled up, my jaw dropped. The front door was wide open. The place had been ransacked. Cabinets ripped off the walls, drawers emptied onto the floor. My grandfather's old deer rifle, which had sat over the mantel since '78, was gone. And on the far wall, spray-painted in huge, sloppy red letters, was the message, "This isn't your home anymore." I stood in the middle of the mess, and I didn't feel rage anymore. I felt this crushing, ice-cold certainty. They weren't just trying to win the land, they were trying to erase the history. Tessa was on the phone instantly, coordinating with Rourke. The deputies worked the scene, dusting for prints, gathering evidence. I pulled up the internal security feed. 3 masked figures, forcing the lock with a serious level of effort. We watched the footage frame by frame, and then, it happened. One of the guys, struggling with a heavy cedar chest, briefly turned his head in a moment of frustration. The ski mask shifted just enough. A clear, undeniable profile, illuminated by the porch light. It wasn't Marcus. It was the other guy from the first day, the compliance officer. His name was Marcus Vance, no relation to Tessa, thankfully. Sheriff Rourke let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be. Marcus Vance, Prescott Thorne's right-hand man." I finally cracked my knuckles, a feeling of grim satisfaction settling over me. "Game over, Thorne. You just handed me the key to your kingdom." The following morning, Tessa and I didn't go to the courthouse. We went straight to the Azure Shores Association headquarters. It was a mausoleum of sleek glass and polished steel, designed to radiate wealth and exclusivity. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I marched straight into the main conference room where Thorne and his board members, all expensive watches and silk ties, were in the middle of a meeting. "Finch, this is a private meeting. You are trespassing." Thorne stood up, his face a mask of outrage. I didn't yell. I just walked up to the long glass table and slammed a manila folder onto it, a copy of the arrest warrant and the still images from my security footage. "It stops now, Thorne." My voice was low, deadly calm. "Your man, Marcus Vance, broke into my house, stole my property, and vandalized my walls. That's a felony. And Tessa here has solid evidence of your conspiracy to fraudulently annex my land." The air in the room thickened. One of the board members, a nervous-looking guy with a terrible hairpiece, stammered, "We have no proof of association involvement. You think Marcus did this little break-in by himself?" I leaned over the table, right into Thorne's personal space. Or did his president tell him to go erase the evidence of the old structure? Sheriff Rourke and the district attorney are very interested in who gave the orders. Thorne's practiced calm finally broke. His face went purple. "You'll regret this, Finch. I will bankrupt you." Just then, the outer doors burst open. Sheriff Rourke and 2 deputies walked in, flanking the entrance. Rourke didn't mince words. "Prescott Thorne, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit felony burglary, harassment, and attempted property fraud." Thorne roared, scrambling backwards. "You can't do this. I'll call the mayor. I'll call the governor." Rourke just smirked. "You can call whoever you want from the county lockup, Mr. Thorne." The deputies cuffed him, pulling him up from his chair. As they let him out, Thorne stared at me over his shoulder, pure hatred in his eyes. I turned to the remaining board members, who were suddenly very interested in the grain of the conference table. I looked at the man with the hairpiece. You hear that, gentlemen? Thorne is gone. The HOA is done. If any of you ever set foot on my land again, I promise you, I will personally ensure your fate makes Thorne's look like a weekend vacation. I walked out, leaving them to drown in the consequences of their own greed. Sound. The smooth jazz guitar returned softly under VO. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind, but the fight was over. Thorne and Marcus took plea deals. The district attorney went after the entire board, revealing years of fraudulent boundary adjustments and forced property sales across the county. My cabin, the old Fisherman's Rest, was ruled illegally annexed. Not only was the land restored to its rightful, independent status, but the Azure Shores Association was ordered to pay restitution to me and every other homeowner they had scammed. Thorne's luxury paradise collapsed. Buyers pulled out, values plummeted, and those glass and stone monstrosities stood empty, monuments to failure. Now, I spend my weekends exactly as I used to, fishing off the dock, chopping wood, smelling the pine. One evening, Sheriff Rourke showed up. We just sat on the porch, watching the sun dip. You really did it, Wren, he said, shaking his head. I didn't lose, I replied. That was never an option. He looked out at the water. You know, you could have just taken the $100,000 and walked away. A lot of people would have. I took a slow sip of my coffee, the heat a comfortable weight in my hands. Maybe, but then they would have won. They would have paved over my history. And what's $100,000 when you lose your soul? I looked at the water, still and golden. It wasn't just about the 3 acres anymore. It was about principle. It was about proving that if you stand your ground, even the richest, most powerful, entitled bastards can be brought down. The lake community is healing now. The old-timers who were bullied into selling are getting their land back. The Azure Shores name is a punchline. The land won, and so did I. Sound. Music swells slightly. But here's the controversial part, and I want to know what you think. Did I go too far? I had a chance to settle, to take the money and avoid the fight. But I didn't. I waited for them to commit a crime, and then I brought them down. Some folks might say, hey, all's fair in love and land wars. Others might say, Caleb, you should have just taken the win and moved on. So, tell me in the comments below, if you were me and they planted that big, ugly sign in your driveway, would you have settled for the money, or would you have fought until the absolute end, even if it meant putting people in jail? Let me know your stance on community justice versus cold, hard cash. Like this video, subscribe for more stories, and I'll see you in the comments.